Have you ever witnessed something unexplainable while walking around late at night? What led a teenager and 2 police officers to battle against an Air Force for the sake of credibility? What event rocked New Hampshire just 4 years after the Betty and Barney Hill abduction? Today, we test the believability of the Exeter Incident.
Welcome to Believing the Bizarre,
where we dive into the unknown and the unusual
and tell you whether or not we find it believable.
That is right. We are back on schedule.
We're back. We're back.
You're back from Florida.
I'm barely alive, but I'm back.
A little sick. You can't escape Florida unscathed.
No.
It doesn't let you. You're either going to get sick, an alligator's going to take a bite out of you, something's going to happen.
I love Florida, but it bit me in the butt this time. That's okay.
But yeah, like the last episode that we put out, the Gin the Empty Room, like that, we did that like a month ago.
Yeah, it came out. I was like, "What's this coming out right now?"
I don't even know what this is about. Like, you tell me what this is about. I had to listen.
I listened to everything that came out while we were on break because I wanted to listen for your Patreon.
Yeah,
I'm always interested in what you're gonna say. I enjoyed them very much.
Yeah, I think the Cursed Games, it was you playing the lines.
Yeah,
right. But we do a segment called Beyond the Bizarre on Patreon, and you'll talk all about your Florida experience and everything. So If you want to hear more about that, that is on there on Patreon. But we're talking about aliens right now.
Yeah.
It's been a little while. Always a nice little break between our alien episodes.
Yeah. We love them, but for some reason they get pushed.
We just don't want to be an alien podcast. Like, just, you gotta mix it up. I would say we put a lot of effort in trying to do, like, okay, a cryptid, and then a haunting, and then an alien, and then a listener submission, and then a conspiracy. We try to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely part of it. Also, I think that haunting sightings are way more prevalent.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know.
I'll be honest. I kind of lean away from the big haunting stories because so many listener submissions that we get are hauntings. Because I think just naturally, like, I get a little excited when I see a listener submission that's a creature or
an alien.
An alien, but that is not to put down any hauntings because I think I love them for that.
I think they're just more common, but that's okay.
Well, that said, today's sources: CBS News, Seacoast NH, which I assume is New Hampshire.
Must be.
Mysterious Universe, and CDN Center for Inquiry.
Okay.
There was a book written about it that I tried to get, but I wasn't able to read it online. So, but that said, let's get to the main story. So this takes place in Exeter, which is in Rockingham County,
I think that's
New Hampshire.
It's Exeter.
Exeter. Peter. So Rockingham, apparently there's this really old woman, like over 100 years old.
Oh, wow.
Actually. And she couldn't move much anymore. She was I don't know if she was bed-stricken. I think she liked to sit down, like that old-style rocking chair.
Yeah.
And she liked to sing and everything. But there was like an epidemic of like really lethargic pigs. Like they didn't want to roll around.
Oh.
They just didn't want to do anything.
Yeah.
But they discovered that the pigs weren't sleeping well. And that was why they weren't moving around much. So they would bring them to this old lady, and she would hold the pigs and sink them to sleep. And that's why it was called Rockingham, because it was in a rocking. None of that's true.
I was like, did I slip into another dimension right now? What's going on?
So Exeter is a nice, quiet, historical town, and our UFO encounter takes place in 1965. And you already know this because we did a quiz based on this encounter in our Patreon as well. So there's a lot going on over there.
If you haven't done the quizzes, those are a lot of fun.
The quizzes are so much fun.
Definitely recommend listening to those.
I feel like when you think of New Hampshire and you think of UFOs, naturally you go Betty and Barney Hill.
Absolutely.
And so this took place 4 years after Betty and Barney Hill. That took place in 1961, and today's encounter took place in 1965. Maybe you wouldn't ask because I know you're feeling a little sick, but I feel like if you're on the edge and fully healthy and full of vitamin D, you'd ask me maybe how close this was.
Oh, that's a really good question. How close was it? So
Exeter is about 2 hours southeast of Grafton County, where the abduction took place. So it's about 2 hours away.
Okay, north. You said south.
So it's southeast.
Okay,
more south than east.
More south.
If that means anything to you. And if for whatever reason, if you're just one of those visual map people and you need to know where Exeter is, it's about 15 minutes west. 15 minutes west of the Atlantic Ocean.
Okay.
And an hour north. And an hour north of Boston.
Session, England.
It's a little bit above Boston.
Okay.
Right. So, in 1965, a lot of reports about seeing unusual things in the sky, unexplainable lights. And for the majority of the year, these encounters were not really discussed. They weren't taken too seriously. They weren't big events. It was just like one call might come in, there's a weird light, and then a few days later, another call. Like, you know. Also, and this will come into play much later in the episode, but I do want to say that there is a nearby Air Force base.
Yeah.
Piece.
Always with these, you find that.
I know. It's a little suspicious, a little sus. So this encounter involves 18-year-old Norman Muscarello.
I don't know. His name got me.
He just finished high school, and he was just a few weeks away from leaving for the Navy. And on September 3rd, Norman was traveling back to Exeter from his girlfriend's home in Massachusetts. It wasn't far, though. It was like 20 minutes. Like,
right. At
first I'm reading this, I'm like, damn, like, girlfriend lives in Massachusetts, he lives in New Hampshire. It's like 20 minutes.
It's like, one of those like border cities, right?
It's like where I grew up, going to Erie, Pennsylvania was like 30 minutes, but you save on that sales tax. But not only like coming back across state lines, but this dude's hitchhiking.
Yeah.
Like he's thumbing it.
He is.
And you are not surprised.
I'm
saying this based on the quiz.
For the time period, no, that makes sense.
It's still wild to me. Like, hey, girlfriend and family, great dinner, see you later.
Yeah.
And like, oh, do you need a ride? He's like, nope, I got this. Thumb. See ya.
You could have just paid them $5 in gas and they would have been rich in gas.
If you pay them $5 in gas in the 60s, that's like 5 steak dinners.
It is, yeah. Here's a quarter. Take me back home.
Yeah. Maybe it was safer back then. I don't know. Apparently, I don't know. The sources I read that a lot of youths in the area hitchhiked.
My dad hitchhiked, I guess.
Did he?
Yeah.
Okay.
He did. He didn't die. Then.
I don't know. Just be like imagine like you're supposed to be at dinner at your girlfriend's house at a certain time.
Yeah.
And you use your cell phone that you don't have in the 60s, and you're like, hey, I'm on my way.
Yeah.
Brenda had to stop at the Red Box.
I'm relying
to drop
on
off a couple of DVDs.
Yeah.
Don't eat the appetizer without me. I don't know. Different time, different world. So on this particular night, he's leaving his girlfriend's house, and he's not having any luck finding a ride back to Exeter because it's 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Not that many people drive. Well, maybe there are. I don't know.
I don't think so. On that
2
road? Yeah.
On 150, I don't know anything about 150. So he did not go back inside to ask his girlfriend's family for a ride because it's 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Or her. I don't know. Maybe she has a car. But here's a quote from Norman from Sea Coast NH to kind of set the scene. Quote, on September 3rd, 1965, around 2 a.m., I was thumbing down Route 50 toward Exeter in Kensington near Mr. Dining's farm. It was a clear night, no rain. There were plenty of stars in the sky. It was just a clear, beautiful night. I'd been up there seeing a girlfriend of mine. I'd missed a ride and I was thumbing back. No cars pick you up at this hour in the morning. And I observed planes in the sky earlier. It's pretty easy for me to understand the difference between a plane and what I ended up seeing. I'm sure if you experienced it, there wouldn't be any question in mine. I just got past the Dining farm. There's a little field on the right-hand side. You can kind of see a glow of Hampton Beach and the lights from the beach, which is very distinguishable. What I'm trying to say is that you can see what's going on. It's pretty obvious that that's a beach area, unquote. So you're kind of getting the feel.
Yeah.
It's late at night. It's a clear night, stars. Maybe he's enjoying his walk.
He left at 2 in the morning?
It's a girlfriend, man. You watched a couple movies.
I guess.
Well, no, the dinner, I'm putting the dinner out there.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I'm sure they ate something.
Yeah. Okay.
He needed his fuel to hitchhike back.
At that point, just like crash on the couch or something.
This is the 60s, my friend.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to sleep on the couch, there's a blanket on the couch, there's a ring on my daughter's finger. You feel me?
Yeah.
So, well, I don't know. Maybe the 60s wasn't like, I wasn't around, okay?
I don't know.
I'm a 90s kid. So when he was close to the town of Kensington on his way home, just a few miles away from Exeter, he noticed something strange. He saw what looked like 5 flashing bright red lights out in the distance. Initially, he thought it might have just been police. Like, it wasn't like way up, like I'm looking at stars. It was ahead of him, and it was raised, but distance and stuff. Like, in his mind, he's like, oh, I'm seeing the lights of a cop car up ahead. However, the closer he got, he realized that these lights were not coming from a police car or any vehicle for that matter. The lights were hovering over the trees at a local farm. To Norman, it seemed as though the lights were part of one large, incredibly bright object that he estimated as being about 80 to 90 feet in diameter. He described it kind of like a floating, lit-up leaf, like a leaf that would go down behind the trees or down behind the barn and then rise up and reappear. Almost as if this craft could sense that Norman was aware of its presence, he was startled to discover that immediately this glowing bright object rapidly started approaching him. Here's a quote from Norman. Quote, "I observed pulsating lights coming from the north, heading in a southwesterly direction towards where I was. I assumed the speed must have been something terrific because it came up on me all of a sudden. Very distant, pulsating erratically, I couldn't make out any distinct pattern, circles, or anything like that. It was just very bright. I couldn't make a silhouette out at all. I didn't know what it was. There was absolutely no sound, other than the fact that I heard horses in Dining's field raising holy hell, kicking the barn. Crickets seemed to quit. My attention was fixed on these lights. I didn't know what it was. It passed over, kind of like disappeared. I don't even know what direction it went in. I was kind of dazed. My eyes were like, seeing spots when someone takes your picture with a camera. I got my eyes cleared, and then here it comes again. I don't have to tell you, you get kind of nervous out there. I mean, I'm all alone. There's no one else standing there to refer to. I just froze up. I didn't really know what to do, and I got scared. I ran across the street. I didn't actually dive, kind of, but I fell because I tripped on something into this ditch, and I just lay there with my head down. And I looked up, and it was like the whole side of the house, which was next door, the next house down from Denning's. I didn't know the people at the time, but I found out that it was Mr. Russell later. The whole side of the building seemed to turn out like a blood red, and yet the lights weren't completely all red either. These lights were still pulsating in erratic positions. I couldn't make out any design or silhouette, and then it took off. I don't know what direction it took off in because my head was down in the ditch. I got up out of the ditch, and I ran to that house, pounding on the door. Later on, I discovered that Mr. Russell was actually awake. Mrs. Russell told me later that they were awake and they heard me pounding, but obviously they're not going to answer the door with this crazy nut pounding at 2 o'clock in the morning, no car out front or anything like that. So they didn't bother answering, but they did remember me. Unquote.
Very
crazy. What are your thoughts so far?
That's very scary. They must have saw him. They must have known he was still there. They can't just I don't think a kid running into a ditch would fool aliens.
Oh, you mean, okay, I didn't know if you meant the family.
No, I mean the spaceship.
Mm.
If it was a spaceship, which I think it was.
Not a tornado or a T-Rex. I can see you.
Exactly. They must have sensors. And I was also thinking during that story, why do spaceships have lights? Why would they need lights?
Maybe their planets are really dark. Maybe they don't have built-in night vision goggles in their big eyeballs.
Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe it's like communication too.
Yeah.
If there's 2 spaceships in the sky, maybe I guess maybe you've heard things like telepathic, but
yeah,
maybe they signal like bees the way they dance. Maybe they signal with their lights to let them know, or you shoot up first and then I'll shoot up and then.
And the 5 lights also made me think of your encounter in Carolina.
Oh.
That's the first thing I thought of. I mean,
that's interesting.
It wasn't the same, I think. Yours was a little bit different.
Yeah. These were, what I was seeing was different crafts. It wasn't one. He's saying 5 lights in one big craft.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it's very interesting. I also really like the idea that this thing's on this house. Maybe it's scanning. Maybe it's doing something. Maybe he assumed that, what's his name? Peter?
Norman.
Maybe Norman ran into that house, and that's why it was scanning for him or something.
You thought it was Peter because you were thinking of Peter Griffin.
Yeah, that's right.
So what happens?
Oh my God, Lois.
So what happens next? So he's pounding on the door. Mr. Russell doesn't answer. Can't blame him. I wouldn't. I would not answer.
No, I wouldn't either. I was I got my good friend shotgun here.
Pew pew.
Yeah, my pew pew.
And then, so as he's pounding on the door, he's looking around and he sees lights approaching. But these are just normal lights. These are the headlights of a car.
Thank God.
Which is good.
Because he's thumbing.
Yeah. I would wonder, though, because so I was imagining, this kid's pounding and then lights come. Would you think Mr. Russell would feel any guilt if it was a UFO and it abducted him?
I thought you were going to say, I would wonder if it was the police coming.
Oh, no. Well,
because I would call the cops.
Well, that's true. They can't get to the cops. You'll find out later why, even if he tried calling, it probably wouldn't have went through.
Oh, interesting.
But, he's got that, my lawn, not my problem, if he got abducted. But I would feel a little guilty if someone was trying to get in my, help me, and then they get abducted.
That's kind of a horror movie.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Like those neighbors. Sorry, you're about to say something.
No.
Like those neighbors in like horror movies where like people escape and they're just like, better go back inside.
It's better that, though, than the people that are in on it. Like when there's like a cult movie.
Yeah.
And then they run in the woods and they find that house and they seem like a nice couple, but then you find out they're like in on it.
Yeah.
They knock you, they chloroform you, bring you back like, sorry.
Yeah, the neighbors that just like watch suck too.
They all
I'm
suck.
thinking of a specific movie, but I cannot remember what it is.
You've only seen like 5, so it's the horror movies.
I don't think it was necessarily horror. It might have been. It doesn't matter.
Okay. So anyway, Norman sees his headlights approaching. He gets his hitchhiking thumb out and ready and starts wildly flagging them down. The couple stop, pick him up. This is before a true crime podcast, so they didn't know better.
Right.
And they bring Norman to the nearest police station. I guess that's a good thing, though.
Yeah.
Like, if you pick up a stranger and they're like, hey, bring me to the police, like, at least they're not like, hey, bring me to this abandoned field
Yeah.
where there's no lights or...
Yeah.
You know.
Ashley Flowers has ruined everybody.
She's awesome, though. When he got inside, he told the police about what happened and the crazy lights and everything. And despite knowing that he had to tell the police about this experience, what occurred, he was also pretty nervous that he was going to be met with ridicule or just completely blown off, which
Obviously.
I don't blame him for that either. But to his surprise, Officer Reginald Tolan told him that he believed him and that they've received several reports of similar things in the sky, like reports that were eerily similar to what Norman had witnessed. Those 2 a.m. night owls out here experiencing some creepy stuff. And but this is a little weird because maybe this is just banter, but like the officer started telling Norman about some of the calls.
That is strange.
It's like, I feel like an officer would keep that closer to the vest, not tell this 18-year-old kid, like, you're not crazy. Oh, this lady called me and you won't believe what she said.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe small town 60s was a little bit different.
I guess they all know each other. Oh,
Yeah.
you know Marcus's mom? Yeah, well, she just called.
Yeah.
And she claimed that a flying craft had chased her in her car home. That was actually one of the calls. Someone called and said a UFO chased somebody while they were driving.
Wow.
A different police officer, Eugene Bertrand Jr., or Gene, mentioned that a woman called and claimed that she was sitting in her car by the side of the road when a huge, unidentified flying object hovered directly over her car before flying up and away. After hearing these stories, Officer Bertrand decided to take Norman back to the farm and check it out and see what was going down.
He took Norman back to the farm?
Yeah. At 2 a.m. So this is like probably
4 or 5 in the morning now.
But also, like, I guess you're looking for evidence at this point. It's not going to be there.
No.
Well, okay. There's more stories. But I just mean, in my mind, if someone had a UFO experience, I wouldn't say let's go back and assume that it's still there.
It's also weird that he's bringing him back there.
Like, instead of like, all right, go home, or I'll drop you off at your home, 18-year-old kid.
Yeah, exactly.
And I will go with Tolan.
Another policeman.
He's like, nope, me and this 18-year-old kid are hanging out. Maybe he wants the first-hand experience.
He's like, you're a junior deputy now, son.
Here's a badge. Ow. But maybe he wanted him to show him. Like, where did you see it?
Yeah.
Because you're getting these calls, right? Like, it's not like it's a one-off.
Yeah.
You're getting a bunch of calls saying weird stuff. You have someone in here that experienced it. Maybe it's like hey, let's take advantage of it. You know, and maybe for his own credibility, he's like, I'm not a nut. You know, I'm actually going to the Navy in a few weeks. And like, okay, I'm law. You're kind of like law, water law. Let's go figure out this thing. So the drive was pretty short. And when Norman and the officer arrived, there really wasn't anything to see. It was quiet, not quite as eerily quiet as when Norman saw these pulsating lights, but nothing really out of the ordinary. The dining farm was empty. There was no one home. And the officer started thinking that maybe Norman just saw a helicopter and he was just tired, hitchhiking 2 a.m. and he'd mistaken it as something else. As they were talking about this as a possibility, some of the horses at the nearby farm started going crazy. They were just kicking and bucking, which led to a bunch of dogs start barking. This startled both the officer and Norman, and they looked around to see what caused the animals to lose their cool. A few moments later, it was completely clear to them. Right above the tree line, Norman and Officer Bertrand witnessed a bright, round object as big as the barn rise up without making the slightest sound. The UFO had a ring of bright red lights around it and seemed to dim from left to right and then back right to left. So if you think about like 5 circles in a row, like lighting up one at a time, it'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, like back and forth. While they were able to tell that the craft was somewhat roundish in shape, It was hard for them to perfectly tell the form of the ship because the lights were so incredibly bright. Then suddenly, the spacecraft started jolting around in a series of erratic maneuvers, dipping and rising back and forth. Alarmed and breaking out of his trance of sorts, Officer Bertrand radioed in for backup and even held his firearm up to this bright light. He didn't shoot at it. I think he was like, I don't know what this is going to do.
He's like, oh.
I got to do something in front of this kid. But a few moments later, the UFO shot up into the night. And right as that happened, a third witness, Patrolman Hunt, pulled up and he was able to see the craft and get a view of it before it flew away. So we got 3 witnesses here.
He's like, y'all see that? That's pretty crazy.
That's nuts. Let me get my camera. What? I don't know what you got in the 60s. Kodak.
I have no idea.
It's those ones where you got to go to Walmart to develop the film. He's like, wait a minute. So it was a very quiet ride back to the police station as both Norman and Officer Bertrand were shocked and mystified regarding what they'd witnessed. They both gave their own reports and soon discovered that a flood of other UFO-related reports were pouring into the station. Their phones were constantly ringing, and it got so bad that the police station decided to alert Pease Air Force Base nearby in Portsmouth. Charlie, what are your thoughts so far?
I was wondering, are there any reports of animal mutilations?
Not here, no. They were going crazy, but no, it wasn't. None of the animals were mutilated. They were just disturbed.
Okay.
They're bothered.
Yeah, I was bothered too by a spaceship. It was very interesting. There's 2 very credible witnesses, the policeman, and then there's a flood of other things going on. I wonder what the goal of, like, I can't get this out of my head. What is the goal of the aliens in this situation? Just to stir up the local population or what?
Like observation?
Yeah.
I don't know. And I mean, that's something that we can't ever fully project because they live a whole different, But one of the biggest things to me, and I kind of want to plant the seed now because we're going to get into people that refute what happened. Mm-hmm. They emphasize that they don't hear anything. And I think that's important.
Yeah.
It's just like the Phoenix Lights.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not like they're seeing this crazy thing and there's all these lights, but it's loud. Like, the loudness is coming from the animals. Which also, like, light obviously could disturb animals, but it's not like there's a noise unless it's a frequency that animals can hear and we can't.
It's like a higher pitch or something.
Which is possible. It's like those mosquito ringtones. But I want to make sure everyone keeps note of the fact that both encounters, the first time with just Norman and then the last time with at least Norman and Officer Bertrand. Hunt came too, but I don't know if he was there to acknowledge that it was quiet. But no sound. And sure, you might argue that they're so fixated visually on what they're seeing that they lose track of other senses. Mm-hmm. I still think there'd be, you'd report some sound.
Yeah, you would know if there's like a hum or a roar or something.
Yeah. So as days went by, the sightings by Norman and the police officers went from local news to national publicity. One particular author, John G. Fuller, came to Exeter to look into the UFO sightings and interviewed various locals. He ended up writing a book about the strange phenomenon, which I tried to read online, called Incident at Exeter.
Good
It's
title.
out there.
Good title.
That's one of the downsides of what we do, in a way. We don't take seasons. If you and I did seasons, I think, like, if it was like, all right, we're going to do 3 months, and we're going to go hard body karate into this research, and not, like, I feel like you and I already do decent. I mean, there are cracks, things slip through the cracks.
Of course, yeah.
You know? But it's like, we do, like, as much research as you can muster in a week of while working full time with other life responsibilities. And I'm not trying to give us an out. Like,
no.
I'm happy with our product and what we put out there on the pod. But, like, in a perfect world, would it be awesome to read this entire book before doing this episode?
Very much, yeah.
You know, like the Hat Man. Like, I bought a Hat Man book and I read a lot of the stories, but, like, in a perfect world, it'd be awesome to be able to read all the books associated with the stories that we cover.
Yeah.
It's just not feasible time-wise.
Right.
And
now.
I kind of want to remind people that sometimes. But either way, that book's out there, and he wrote it. And with all the publicity, the U.S. Air Force decided to begin their own investigation in the matter.
Uh-oh.
They sent in Major David Griffin, not to be confused with the NBA general manager.
Or Peter Griffin.
And Lieutenant Alan Brandt, who conducted their own interviews with townsfolk, and also interviewed the 3 main witnesses, Norman, Officer Bertrand, and Officer Hunt. These interviews were submitted as a report into Project Blue Book, which will probably be... there's probably... You think it's enough for an episode on its own? Like, it's like a character in a bunch of stories, but I don't know if it's enough to, like...
I don't know. I think that's a side story, or it's a
Side quest.
Yeah, it's not come to fruition yet.
Yeah. Also, not to be confused with Project Blue Beam, if anyone knows what that is.
Oh.
So, anyways, Project Blue Book, and here's a quote from Major Griffin. Quote, "At this time, I've been unable to arrive at a probable cause of this sighting. The 3 observers seem to be stable, reliable persons, especially the 2 patrolmen. I viewed the area of the sighting and found nothing in the area that could be probable cause. Pease Air Force Base had 5 B-47 aircrafts flying in the area, but I do not believe that they had any connection with this sighting," unquote. Not bad. He's kind of like, all right. You know, I'm not saying they're right, but I ain't saying they're lying.
Could be China.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what he was trying to. If you read the first letter of every sentence, it says China did it.
No, but for real, that is actually pretty good from an Air Force base.
Yeah. There's I don't know why I thought of that, and I can't remember her name. I'm gonna say Nicole. I don't think it's Nicole. It's like maybe a Naomi or something. Maybe it is Nicole. But if you take the first letters of every dead space level, it spells out. I think let's just pretend it's Nicole. It says Nicole is dead.
Okay.
That's the girlfriend that you're looking for on the ship the whole game. And then, but you find out. Cool. It is Nicole. I'm proud I remember that. Okay. So regardless of that wonderful quote from Major Griffin, the Air Force wanted to sweep this under the rug, as they do everything, and spoke to the media saying that everything was just misidentified stars and planets. But here was their reasoning. It wasn't just like, you're dumb. It's but they were saying that it was temperature inversion which caused a mirage. So according to the National Weather Service, a temperature inversion is a layer in the atmosphere in which the temperature increases with height. So basically a layer of warm air is trapped above cold air at night. So instead of it being like warm, cold, coldest, there's like a warm air trapped. Mm-hmm. It says clues that this is occurring are mist, fog, or frost, smoke or dust hanging in the air, which may move horizontally just above the surface, or cumulus clouds disperse as evening approaches with very clear skies, which he did say was a clear sky.
Yeah.
I swear they love, government officials, law folk, they just love blaming planets on the UFOs.
It's really weird to think that, a man mistaking a spaceship coming at him could just be a planet.
Yeah. They're basically saying these twinkling stars and planets were distorted visually by the temperature inversion, but
pretty extreme.
It's also 2 officers.
Yeah.
And all these people around town, which I guess the same atmosphere is probably impacting the entire town, but
even still.
Of this planet was hovering right over my car.
And then took off.
Yeah. Then Project Blue Book claimed that despite Major Griffin's analysis, they believe that what the witnesses truly saw, if it wasn't just this temperature inversion, was the B-47 aircrafts flying in the area on training missions. Here is a quote from them. Quote, "The incident might have been caused by planes from a training exercise dubbed Big Blast, which occurred early in September. The town of Exeter is within the traffic pattern utilized by air traffic control in the recovery of these aircraft at Pease Air Force Base," unquote. Now, Norman, Bertrand, and Hunt were adamant that this was not correct. Bertrand in particular voiced his opinion that he would be able to accurately identify any craft in the air, commercial or military, and strongly believed it was a UFO they witnessed. He even claimed that night, or around that time, he'd seen a B-47 in the area. So he had the perfect ability to do comparison. He could discern, okay, I saw this earlier today or earlier this week. This is a B-47, and this is drastically different from what we saw. And here's a complaint filed by Officer Bertrand. Quote, "As you can imagine, we've been the subject of considerable ridicule since the Pentagon released its final evaluation of our sighting of September 3rd, 1965. In other words, both Patrolman Hunt and myself saw this object at close range, checked it out with each other, confirmed and reconfirmed that it was not any type of conventional aircraft, and went to considerable trouble to confirm that the weather was clear. There was no wind, no chance of weather inversion, and what we were seeing was in no way a military or civilian aircraft. It was absolutely silent, with no rush of air from jets or chopper blades whatsoever. And it did not have any wings or a tail. It lit up the entire field, and 2 nearby houses turned completely red." Yeah. Mic drop.
That's a good report.
So there's one theory as to specifics on what they might have seen. and we will get to that in one moment. All right, so here is a quote from cdncenturyforinquiry.org about what they truly believe these three witnessed. Quote, like seeing an old friend, he gazed on a mothballed KC-97 tanker whose fuselage is arrayed with a row of 5 red sequencing lights. Those would reflect on the refueling boom, which, according to the flight manual, when lowered is inclined at 64 degrees. Just this type of craft operated out of a strategic air command bomber bases like that of Pease Air Force Base, and indeed would surely have been involved in a training exercise like that dubbed Big Blast on September 2nd through the 3rd, 1965. But what about the fact that this exercise, which was going in the skies over Exeter at the time of the first sightings, had supposedly ended about an hour before Norman and Officer Bertrand had their close encounter? Well, it seems quite apparent that, although the particular exercise was reportedly over, there were still planes in the sky. Bertrand and Hunt, in fact, witnessed a B-47 jet at the time that the UFO disappeared. Perhaps it had just refueled. The airborne refueling process of the KC-97 is both interesting and relevant. Briefly, it involved the KC-97 making long circuits of the rendezvous area. As the jet to be refueled began to approach, the boom was lowered and the receiver, the sequencing lights that they saw, were turned on. However, when the jet was in very close proximity, the receiving lights were turned low. Otherwise, their extreme brightness would temporarily blind the approaching pilot. There would be some jockeying as the two planes connected for the refueling, and all of this would look exceedingly strange to an observer on the ground. Thus, on one of its long passes, the slow-moving KC-97 could have seemed to be chasing the first eyewitness on Route 101. It was subsequently seen by young Norman and later still Bertrand with its boom down at its characteristic angle. This boom, which bore its own small wings, would actually flutter in the air currents, which no doubt explains eyewitnesses Norman's statement that the UFO acted like a floating leaf. Most notable were the tanker's 5 red lights, which were flashing in the sequence accurately described by the witnesses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The extreme brightness of the lights rendering other features of the objects indistinguishable from the ground is further evidence of the UFO's identification as a KC-97 refueling plane. Unquote. It's not bad. It's not bad.
There are some elements of that I will admit are maybe somewhat damning, but also what they're describing is not exactly what happened.
Yeah. So hold that thought. We're going to save the discussion for the discussion.
Okay.
But before we do that, I wanted to add a little spice. You know what I like to do? I like to spice, a little this. So I was like, well, okay, cool. This is not the longest story, but it's a fun one. But this is a New Hampshire UFO story. What other little UFO sightings exist in New Hampshire? I went to our good friend Reddit and another site, and that's what we're going to talk about now. All right, I got 6 stories. They're short, they're fun, they're little UFO encounters.
Popcorn bites.
Popcorn bites, popcorn
You
chicken.
ever put the candy in the popcorn in the movie theater?
What?
You ever put like the candy in the popcorn?
No, but I know people who have. Like the Crunch-A-Bunch inside a popcorn.
I have not done it either. I assume it'd be good.
The worst thing is I sit down and I got the popcorn and the drink and the stuff, and then I realized I didn't, and I haven't done this in a long time, didn't grab any napkins. Because the second, like, as soon as your hands touch the butter,
pretty greasy. Yeah.
That's, that I think that's all you need. There's people that do use their phones in a movie theater. Not, well.
What?
Like people are on their phones now.
Oh, that's crazy.
I don't go to the movie theaters a ton, but I have noticed it. But I feel like just the butter enough should stop you from wanting to use your phone.
Yeah. I don't have to get popcorn in the movie theater.
Regardless, I got 6 stories. Let's get into it. The first one is from Gavin B5784.
All right, Gavin.
What's up, Gavin?
Touching this.
Quote, "Hi, I'm new here. I don't post much on Reddit, so apologize if I'm tagging or posting or whatever this the wrong way. I was talking to my dad recently about the Pentagon report and what he thought of it. He said, let me tell you what I know about UFOs. When he was a youth in the 1960s, he lived in Dover, New Hampshire, which wasn't far from Pease Air Force Base, where they seem to have that secret aircraft from time to time. If you know of the Exeter incident, this is the same area, same time frame. He remembers seeing an SR-71 when it was still classified, and many folks seem to think it was a UFO. Okay, so an SR-71, at least to today's eyes, that should be obvious it's a jet. What he described next was in a different ballpark. He then told me of seeing things that would make 90-degree turns out of nowhere, accelerate like mad, and all the rest of that. Basically, exactly the way that UAPs are described today. He says once the base closed down and the UFOs disappeared. So he said, while it might be, quote, not us, his reasoning is that those UFOs might have actually been secret technology like the SR-71 was. But given the way he described these things, I was like, are you sure, like really sure, that we'd have technology anywhere near that capability in the 60s? He seems to think it's possible, and he seemed pretty nonplussed about the whole thing. Don't know if he's onto something or if it's a bit of a normalcy bias, but I was blown away by his description and surprised he didn't seem to be much excited about it, especially in today's context. It's like someone seeing a dinosaur walk by and thinking, interesting, there must be a logical explanation for this. Either way, he's pretty agnostic about this. So,
yeah.
Not to, he seems to think it's us.
He's got a point, though.
Yeah.
Like, the disconnect between what civilians know and the military/intelligence agencies know, I think is very vast.
Yeah.
I think, like, it could either be our military or even foreign military. And that's what's almost frustrating about this whole situation. Like, is it just like, let us know if it's of this world?
Like, give us like a blinking system.
Yeah.
Like, while you're giving your press release or you're discussing it, if it's just our technology that you're trying to hide from other countries, blink twice.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Give us the nod.
That at least makes more sense to me. I don't know.
Our government really needs to abduct farmers, though, to really.
I don't know.
That's the way to get new employees. Like, you're recruited. That should be a 60s recruit thing, is like them picking people up. I'm still waiting for the cow force to come through.
That'd be wonderful. I love cow force.
All right, Reddit story number 2. This took place in Warner, New Hampshire, and it's from Ivy Amber Pale. Quote, for the last few years, I've been seeing these orange hovering lights that dart up and out of the atmosphere in New Hampshire. A lot of these sightings are in the Concord, Warner area. If anyone else sees these or has more information, please let me know. I'm trying to keep track of all these New Hampshire sightings. Also, some have been white at times or switch between the two colors. I used to live near an airport, so I know the light differences on aircraft and whatever these things are. I'm hoping to be able to capture footage or pictures. I usually don't have a camera on me, but obviously now that has changed. So I will say someone in the chat of this Reddit post asked, could you be more specific about what dart up and out of the atmosphere means? I'm having a hard time picturing that. And the original poster responded, well, I'm not sure if it's out of the atmosphere. That's just what it looks like a shooting star, but in reverse, from ground to sky almost. It's hard to explain, thus why I want to get footage and pictures of it. I guess my phrasing just came across arrogant, but that's not how I meant it to come across.
Also, I live by an airbase, and I know what all the lights are on the spaceship, on the airplanes.
Not to be arrogant.
Not to be arrogant, but I know what every light pattern is.
If you cover my eyes and I just listen for 2 seconds and I hear a hum, I know what that is.
Like,
that's a Boeing.
It does come off that way, right?
But also, experience is experience.
Yeah,
but
it's true.
It's just like, I've lived near there, so I know it. I live near an airport, and I love it. I love all
Have
the
you
planes.
do you know all the airplane lights?
No, I don't even know. Like, when I was just talking about that last one, the SR-71, I don't know what the fuck that is. It's a plane.
Yeah, like I know that sometimes airplanes have red lights on the one wing and green lights on the other. I love seeing those. I love seeing that because when I look up, I think we've talked about this before. I look up, I'm like, there's like 30,
There's more than
50,
30. There's more than 50.
125
Yeah, there you go.
people in that plane right now going somewhere.
Where are they going? Well, I like the app that you have. You can track it. If it'll tell you the planes overhead and where they're departing from.
That's really cool.
To. A lot of the ones by me are going to Akron. It's weird.
Yeah, strange.
All right, so the third encounter is from New Hampshire Magazine, and it's Michael Berry. I think there was more to the story, but this was kind of this was his experience from it.
Okay.
Quote, it was a clear summer night in the early 80s. I was hanging out with 2 friends, Ken and Tom, at Audiorn State Park in Rye, when one of them pointed to a light, a bright white light over the bathhouse. It seemed like nothing more than a beacon to keep nighttime visitors from stubbing their toes. And then it suddenly dimmed and moved silently in a fashion unlike any kind of vehicle we'd ever heard of. It rose above the boathouse and danced in strange patterns. Then it turned, flew higher, and headed out to sea and out of sight. From the Dinner Horn restaurant back in Portsmouth, Ken called Peace Air Force Base and reported what we'd seen. The person on the telephone took the information and said someone would be in touch if they had any questions. Nobody ever made any further inquiries. As sightings go, mine is not outstanding. It wasn't frightening, it was just a little weird and mysterious, but it was definitely a UFO. Literally a flying object that we could not identify.
And that's fair.
It's still very cool. As far as seeing a UFO experience where you're not in danger and it's distant and it's cool, I had nothing wrong with that one.
Yeah.
All right, that one was from a magazine. This is from Reddit again. This took place again in Warner, New Hampshire, and this is from Wiley93. Around 9:20 this evening, while driving a friend home from work on Shudak Road in Warner, New Hampshire, near the intersection of Couchtown Road, my friend and I saw what appeared to be a large object with green lights falling very fast towards Earth. It seemed to be very close and looked as if it hit somewhere in the woods nearby. Neither of us heard any sort of crash sound, but we went looking for it and couldn't find anything. This is the craziest thing I've ever seen and gave both of us shivers. I have no idea what it was, but if anyone has any ideas or what this might have been, please share. That could have been meteor.
Yeah.
Because it's based on, like, the color of it is based on what it's made of, like nickel or iron.
Copper burns green.
Yeah, so I think it being green, this feels more like the Baker Mayfield.
Also, Couchtown makes me feel like...
Couchtown Road?
I feel like every house on that road is made of couches, which would be pretty cool to see.
Oh my goodness. Reclining Avenue?
Yeah. Recliner Street.
You know, all of those would be better than Accent Chair Drive. Nothing's more uncomfortable than an accent chair. I would not live in that house. The big bad wolf is blowing that house down. All right, here's our last Reddit encounter. This is from Big Fart 666.
What?
Yeah.
I don't know if I believe it.
Well, I wouldn't have wrote it down if it wasn't true. All right, quote, I always wanted to see if anyone has seen something like this. It was July 5th, 2018. I was in the middle of New Hampshire with a friend group celebrating the July 4th weekend. Our camp was based on a lake, and we were all down by the water smoking and drinking. I was pretty tired and was set back from the group with one of my buddies, just honestly looking up at the stars with him and talking about space and how neat it was. I was looking up at the stars when I noticed one of them was moving, or at least that's what I thought. Over the course of about 1 or 2 minutes, I watched what looked like 2 stars rotate slowly around each other. Like the motion they were doing, picture a twist-off cap and the arrows on them. They rotated around each other really slowly. When I realized what was happening, I said aloud to my friend, "Hey, are you seeing this?" And before I could even finish the sentence, he said, "Yep." We were silent and blown away. We signaled to the rest of the group, "Hey guys, look." And everyone turned to see the 2 stars, which were now linear, vertically separate. One went up and the other stayed still. The one to the north moved slowly upwards as fast as they'd been rotating before, and eventually faded off. The other one, which was now still stayed in its position, and as the night went on, kept moving with the rest of the stars as if it was nothing. It was the wildest thing. I've never seen anything like it, and was so pumped that everyone saw it. There were plenty of stars that night, and the sky was highly visible. It was around 2 a.m, and the lights looked just like stars. There was really nothing different about them. The one that went north was not a satellite. I've seen those before, and this definitely moved slower. Any thoughts? Unquote.
What are you thinking?
I don't know. It's the rotation aspect is what gets me, because it's like it's almost like a Venn. It makes me think of like a Venn diagram type of, like, I think satellites move pretty slow, so maybe one aspect of it could have been a satellite. But if they really were rotating in that like circular way, I have no idea what else that would be.
I don't either. I can't think of a natural phenomenon. It's like too close to be stuck in another thing's gravity, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's just like, I mean, if you see a satellite or you see even like the space station, it's like it has a path, a straight path, and you watch it and you can kind of, once you see the way it's going, you can predict where it's going to be in the sky. This, I don't know, very strange. I don't know. Even if it was a plane, like two planes that high playing around.
Right, no.
And if it was something like discharged, falling, it doesn't seem to have a falling pattern.
Mm-mm.
So I don't know. I would be shocked.
It also did make me think of or binary star systems.
What do you mean?
Like two suns.
Oh.
Circling each other. Which is actually, I'm pretty sure this is right, more common than single star systems.
But you wouldn't be able to see it. Like
no.
The movement when you would not be visible.
Yeah, let's just put in my head. I was just thinking of I think Alpha Centauri is supposed to be a star system,
like Tatooine.
Yes. Anyway,
do you remember when we were walking with Ethan and we saw that light go straight up?
That was really weird.
Yeah,
I still think about that sometimes.
Do you? Because I really don't, but it was pretty remarkable.
I do think about that sometimes.
It might have just been the angle we were seeing an airplane, and like I said, I live by an airport. And we were walking around my house. But it did seem to go straight up. Yeah. And if it blinked and you lost it, it'd be like bright, disappeared, bright, disappeared, bright, disappeared, clouds.
It was very strange.
But with that said, those are our fun little New Hampshire UFO sightings, potential sightings, and one older person's perspective who was there around the Exeter incident time. So let's get to the discussion and talk more about the incident at Exeter. Right, before we get to the discussion, we like to stop the episode and thank our newest patrons who, as of the recording of this episode, include Ferb, Liz, Alfonso, and Cody with 2 E's. Charlie's back.
I'm back.
I'm going to let you take the floor. I've done it for 2 weeks. You all know my thoughts on it. Charlie, the floor is yours. Let people know what you like about Patreon, why you think they should join, all that good stuff. And I'm going to drink my coffee.
Okay. So if you're new to Patreon, we've got a lot of things on there. Something I really want to talk about, Tyler talked about at the top of the episode, was Beyond the Bizarre, where you get to talk a little bit about our lives, what's going on beyond the podcast, just what's going on with us. If you're interested in that at all, that's where that is. Because we're not going to put that in the foreground. That'd be silly. But we also got lots of things going on, like quizzes. There's a quiz attached to this episode. We just put something out called a theatrical reading, which is highly edited, really well recorded, and it's something that we're really proud to present. If you're familiar with the No Sleep podcast, it's kind of in the same vein as that.
For sure. Quizzes, games, behind the scenes. We watch movies together, Google Hangouts, Shoot the Breeze, news segments that are bizarre and creepy. So much bonus content. Easily 6 to 7, 8 pieces of recorded content every month. But with that said, let's get back to the Exeter incident. Okay, so I think the biggest, I'm not going to say it's the weather inversion. I'm not going to buy that.
No way. Are you kidding me?
So let's talk about it in two veins as, was this a true UFO experience, and not just Norman, but the entire town, versus this, I'll give it well thought out. Like, this wasn't just planets, stars. The well thought out idea that it could be this B-47 that was also being met with this other plane in like a refueling process.
I will say there are some, like you said, there are definitely merits to the refueling process. It answered some questions. To me, it doesn't fully explain it, because I don't think a plane can explain how it turns two houses like red.
Well, I think what it's saying is that the lights dim when the other plane approaches.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't want to blind the pilot who's going to do the refueling. But then once it begins or it's ready to take off, I think what it's saying is it is incredibly bright. So I think they might have caught it in the refueling process, which is why it looked like a leaf. And then as they got closer to it and it took off was like the detaching. Because it was even saying like the angle that it has to be at the boom, the angle it has to be at to do the refueling is similar to what they were seeing. So it's got the 5 red lights in the same exact pattern that Norman claimed. It's got the lights aspect of it where it's like blinding, and they said it's a bright red light. So it is the bright red light. The only thing I'm tripping up on is the sound. I mean, yeah, that's not the only thing, but the sound is the biggest thing for me, because I cannot imagine that the refueling process and having 2 planes that low,
that's
quiet.
Thing. How close to the ground are these planes? Like, that's the other thing. Like, they'd have to be incredibly low.
Well, they were saying it's like it was dipping above and below the tree line.
Yeah.
That's really low to be refueling Like, just land. I don't know. I don't fly planes.
Point, yeah.
There's got to be a gas station somewhere. Use that $5 instead of the girlfriend. Go light up the plane with some gas. I don't know. Like, I think that there is merit to what they're saying. And I guess going back to it, maybe they were so focused. Norman being so focused on what he's seeing maybe distracted him from what he was hearing or like tuning it out. Like his vision was so hyper focused on it that he didn't notice. But I feel like Bertrand and Hunt maybe should have been able to tell.
If it was that.
Yeah.
Or they saw an alien ship, which makes sense to me. I don't know. That also seems like the perfect cover for a spaceship. In the midst of these U.S. ships or U.S. Airplanes flying around, that's a great thing to observe if you're an alien.
Yeah. We can blend right in. Maybe they built their spaceship to match it. That's not true. I don't know. It's not like, oh, why would there be these random planes here? It makes sense. The Air Force Base they were testing.
It's true.
Like the lights match up, the red lights match up, the pulsating, the floating like a leaf because it's refueling. There are certainly things like I think this is out of all the government explanations we get for certain things on why it's not aliens.
Yeah.
This one is actually, I definitely think there's merit to
This
it.
one's definitely the best one.
I think it's pretty solid. It's mostly the sound. The sound and the fact that like Bertrand wasn't able to identify it as that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even because it's like they weren't caught off guard in the same way. Like Norman was shocked. He's just walking home hitchhiking.
At 2 a.m.
He's caught off guard. Like when Bertrand and Norman are going back there, he should be mentally aware of like, I'm looking for unusual things.
Yeah.
If he like, and maybe he doesn't know about the Air Force Base's training going on, but he said that he saw the B-47s, so he knows what they look like.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if you're going looking for the unusual, it's not like you shouldn't have been caught off guard. I guess you can't mentally prepare to see UFO, but he was going there expecting to find something.
Yeah.
So why be like, I feel like he should be able to identify, oh, I could see why you think this was a UFO, Norman. It's actually this.
Or it just doesn't look like that. You know, it looks like something else.
I mean, it is interesting how it's like, it had 5 red lights that went 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, and the fact that's exactly the same as like this refueling.
I know. That is, or maybe they're just saying that.
And the angle that it was at with like, I don't know.
But there are things in here that, I know. This one's very frustrating to me.
So, Charlie.
Yeah.
Every episode, I know we haven't done one in a while. I mean, you've heard them every week, but we haven't done one in a while. Let me refresh, because I know you were in Disney.
Okay.
So we have a believability scale.
Yeah.
It goes from believable, this definitely was unusual, this was paranormal, to viable, skeptical, and unbelievable, it's a planet, weather inversion. Where do you land on the Exeter incident? Do you think believable was aliens, or do you think unbelievable, it was just a B-47 getting refueled?
It's really difficult. The fact that there were so many sightings also plays into it, because were they all just refuelings? Were they all just like momentary practices? What
they believed was that what that lady saw chasing her was the refueling plane going to refuel the plane. Like it was, it's not like it was like it was the B-47 and the refueling plane the whole time together.
Yeah.
It's what she saw was the plane slowly going to refuel the plane.
It does
apparently
explain in a sense a lot of these sightings. But also you've got 2 very credible witnesses that say this was not a plane that we've known and seen. This is a spaceship. I'm going with viable. Honestly, I think there is more that meets the eye in this situation.
Yeah, I'm going to join you in viable, and it's mostly because of the sound. Yeah. Like, unless somebody hits us up and is like, hey, here's a YouTube video of this thing fueling a B-47, and it's actually remarkably quiet.
Yeah.
Then I'll be like, oh, okay, skeptical.
Yeah, they turn off the jets, and they free fall.
You think there's any chance that he didn't know what that was, and then when he learned what it was, he didn't want to be... Because some people are like, it's more important to get it right than to be right, but when your credibility's on the line, you don't want to be like, oh, I was wrong.
Well, the sound. I don't know. Like your point, though, the sound.
But I just mean, like, let's pretend it wasn't a UFO.
Okay.
If Bertrand thought it was a UFO, and he later discovered what it truly was, but he didn't want to be like, you know, like, oh, you were wrong. You're dumb. You did all this misinformation. Like,
I could see someone not owning up to it because they were wrong. I feel like I would swallow my pride, but I don't think most people would. Also, I can't know. I'm not in those circumstances.
well, it'd almost be like, yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying I didn't know. You know,
Right.
you can make I feel like people are too afraid to make a new opinion when you get new information. There's nothing wrong with that, people.
I agree with that.
People will call you a flip-flopper. There's nothing wrong with that. Get new information and make informed choices.
And then you flop.
Then you flop. But I'm going to stay viable until I get new information.
Yeah.
But until then, that's where I'm at. So that is our episode on the Exeter Incident. Like we said, there is a quiz attached to this.
I say there is a book.
There's a book. You can find the book somewhere in paperback and probably read it. There's a quiz attached to this episode. And obviously we did that before this episode because Charlie couldn't know about it. So if you want to know how Charlie did Charlie win the quiz? Did he beat me? Or did I stump Charlie? You can find that on a Patreon along with quizzes to many other episodes we did. Whole bunch of other stuff. Today we're recording Beyond the Bizarre. Do you believe the Bizarre will be coming out soon? I know that's in the process. There's tons of stuff out there. If you're interested in that bonus content. Also, I mentioned it last week, and they're in, and there will be social posts about it in the next week or so. But our 2024 enamel pin, which is exclusive to our Not tier, is here.
Yeah.
You only have to be a member for a month.
I'm literally holding it right now.
He's holding it. It's not like the shirt or the hoodie that requires you to be a member for a few months, 3 months to be exact. If you are a member for one day, you could just join the Not tier for one day and leave. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but if you did that, you would get this pin. And it's only here for this year. Like the 2023 ones, those are gone.
Yeah, you can't get those anymore.
So the 2024 one is here. It's not deer base, which is fun.
It's a very cool design. It
shout
came
out
out
Jalen.
really cool.
Yeah, shout out Jalen. She killed it. It's
For
awesome.
sure.
But there's tons of bonus stuff out there. So if you're caught up on the podcast, you want a little bit more, go check that out.
And if you like this episode and you want to give us some kind of support without any kind of financial burden, please go to Apple and give us a 5-star review. And if you could write a good review, that'd be great because those help us. Or if you're on Spotify and you just want to leave 5 stars and write a comment on this episode, that is also something you can do.
We appreciate it. We appreciate all the listeners out there, all the feedback that we're getting. We truly do look at it, and we appreciate it. So thank you so much for listening to the podcast with two guys that would absolutely never hitchhike from our girlfriend's house at 2 a.m. As always, I'm Tyler.
And I'm Charlie.
And catch us next week on Believing the Bizarre,
a podcast as bizarre as you are.